Hello, everybody. Welcome to DermaSpark Academy. Before Ellen will start, I just want to draw the attention of everybody to the next webinar next week. It's going to be a very special webinar. We are going to host Professor Ashraf Badawi, a dermatologist, which is very famous all over the world. And I had the pleasure to be in a few presentations of Professor Badawi, and this is a pleasure. Highly recommended. To today's webinar. So as you all know, we are going to do things differently. Ellen gained a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge with courses that she went through, and we would like to share this information with you, our dear customers, and with relevant information about the specific equipment that we carry, about how to sanitize it and how to keep it sterile. So without further ado, I am going to give Ellen the stage. Ellen?
Hi, everyone.
They're all yours.
Wonderful. Do I have control of the slides or do you?
You have to share your screen.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Hang on just a second. I will do that.
And if you want everybody to see you, you have to turn on your video.
I cannot start the screen share while you are sharing yours, it tells me.
No, now you're sharing your screen.
Now I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, you are. We can see your screen. No, just a minute.
No.
Yes, you can share your screen.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's get this started. So welcome to our webinar. We're going to be looking at prevention and health, safety, and aesthetics. And it's important to mention that DermaSpark, we as a company, we're not health professionals. We're not meant to replace any of the council or the protocols or recommendations of the health officials in your area. Our sole intent here today is just to try to provide you with some useful information, with some guidelines that essentially may serve beneficial to you, our customers, and to the customers that are coming into your establishments, and make everyone feel a little bit safer. So we're going to go through some information today about disinfectants, PPE, how to use them, what's suggested, and take a look at all of the possible techniques that we know so far that are at our discretion. So for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm a regional manager for DermaSpark for Quebec and Eastern Ontario for the last several years. And in Quebec and Ontario, today is definitely a very, very special day for us all because we're either preparing to reopen our clinics. Some have reopened today. Some are in preparation for that Tuesday morning return, and others essentially on the island of Montreal. We're looking at June 15th as being a target date. So I don't know who's open or who's not yet that's joining us, but I do hope that some of the information we can give you will be beneficial. So to give you a little bit of background, I'm in the Greater Montreal area, which, as you all know, has become famous and for some very unfortunate and devastating cases with this virus over the last few months. So it's very easy to understand the fragile situation that we were feeling we were in, and the need for lots of research and learning very quickly. So after several courses, after much research as to different protocols, different guidelines, we've created this presentation today to help you adapt. Because essentially aesthetics as we knew it before has changed, and it's going to change. The world changed, so we need to change in consequence of that. And what I'm going to suggest here today is that essentially all the protocols you already use, all the safety measures that you already use in your clinics and in your businesses, that you continue to use them, but that you also open your mind and your daily functioning to embrace the changes and to see how we're able to adapt and how we're able to move forward. So, let's take a look here. What are those changes? What do we need to do, and how essentially are we going to reduce the risk? With anything else, knowledge is power, and it's the antidote to fear. So if you're anything at all like me, you've had probably a few fearful moments over the last 10 to 12 weeks. Like all of you, I work in the public, oftentimes in very, very close physical contact with customers. I have asthma. I have 2 teenagers that are 13 and 14 that both have asthma. And for any of you that actually have children, you know 2 things are virtually impossible. One is to keep them at a 2 meters distance from their friends and their family. And 2, they're constantly touching their face. But realistically, when we look at it again, aren't we all kind of the same way? Aren't we all really not accustomed to keeping this distance? So we need to figure out how to move forward. And to do that, we're going to take a deeper look at this virus that's changed and will continue to change the way we live our lives in the coming weeks and in the coming months. And we're going to try to shine a little light and demystify what the virus is and how we're able to move forward. So the best way for us to do this is to start with a better picture or a better understanding of what a virus is, how it's transmitted, how do we protect ourselves, how do we protect the people around us. And at the end of the day, we have one primary goal, and it's to reduce the risk. We're going to look together to see what we can do to make ourselves a little bit more comfortable, to make our customers coming into our businesses a little bit more comfortable moving forward. So here's a quick flashback to the way we functioned in aesthetics not so long ago. With what's been going on in the last few months and what we've been living, I'm sure I'm not alone in looking at some of these pictures and feeling just a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe even a little bit of a gasp can escape. Things changed very, very quickly in our environment, but in aesthetics, that's already something that we're very accustomed to. Change and evolution, we're very skilled at that. So that's good news. We're not people who have been working in offices or have been working solely behind a computer screen. So we already have a pretty good grip on disinfections and cleaning and protocols. And I think we're going to be a little bit more adaptable moving forward. So let's take a look at some of the changes that we have to make and what we can do if we're able to keep a 2 meter distance. When we're not able to keep a 2 meter distance, what additional protocols and precautions we'll need to take. So the suggestions that I'm going to give you moving forward are from different health officials, they're from classes, but each territory, each province, each city is going to be different. So it's very, very important that you get in touch with your local health officials to be sure that your business, that your staff, that everyone coming into your business is meeting all of the requirements. So we've heard a ton of information about COVID-19. We're now going to do just a quick overview and figure out what types of germs there are and see where COVID-19 actually fits in with this. So there's a few things that we know. Germs aren't new. From the beginning of time, we've lived in an environment with germs. Some are more intrusive, some are less intrusive. But realistically, if we didn't know in the past, we for sure know it today in the present, that they are some of the greatest predators of human life and essentially of just the way we exist. And pandemics aren't new either. Pandemics occur cyclically. You've very likely seen a few of them already in your lifetime. We've had H1N1s, known as swine flu. We've had AIDS. We've had Ebola. And the pandemic that we're now all too familiar with is the Spanish flu that happened back in 1918. And it turned the world upside down in somewhat the same way as COVID-19 is doing it to us today. So it's realistically the closest comparison that we have historically to draw on. and to try to understand the impact that this unprecedented is always the term we're hearing, episode is having on our lives. You know, realistically, when did we ever imagine that the whole world would shut down for weeks or for months? And we need to figure out how to move forward from there. So that's what we're learning. The Spanish flu was horrible. It was responsible for anywhere from 20 to 50 million deaths worldwide. It came in 2 waves. The second wave was described as ferocious and devastating. And it was with the Spanish flu that we see the comparisons now as people, as scientists, as medical practitioners scramble all around us, trying to prevent and trying to restore some type of normalcy to our existence. So with COVID-19, it's the same thing. There's been many deaths, there's been illnesses, people have suffered many losses, like with any other pandemic. But it's very important that we hold on to a few things. One of them, we're no longer in 1918. So today we have a lot more knowledge. We've got tools, we have much more access to knowledge than we did 100 years ago. We know about transmission channels, basically something that wasn't understood decades ago and 100 years ago for sure. We definitely didn't have the technology and the scientific testing ability that we have today. We didn't have the experience that we have from that pandemic and from others to help us draw on and figure out how to move forward. So as hard as this has been, realistically, we're probably much better equipped to handle this pandemic than we would have been at any other time in history. So very quickly, when things started to evolve a few months ago, we were able to identify the sequencing of the virus with the way communication has evolved, and we're connected, all of us here tonight, even just at the tip of our fingers. We've got some of the most brilliant minds around the world that are all working together towards a resolution. So the moment a discovery happens, we know it instantaneously worldwide. And those are all things that we need to realize. It's important for us to recognize the past, but we need to move forward proactively without fear. So what is the virus? We've heard a ton of information about over the last few months, and what's become known as COVID-19 for us is actually a strain of the SARS virus that we were familiar with a couple of decades ago. COVID-19, CO for corona or crown, which you've all seen the shape, VI for virus, D for disease, and 19 for the last few numbers of the year that it came and really shook up our lives a little bit and changed the way we do things. We know some of the symptoms. The symptoms evolve as our understanding of this virus did, and it's important that we recognize them so that we're able to be proactive and to prevent moving forward. So this list, by all means, isn't all inclusive. There's a ton of other symptoms. We're seeing what those symptoms are more and more as we move forward. We see that children often have similar symptoms, but less aggressive. We see that symptoms can range from very mild to almost non-existent to very severe in the drop of a pin. People that are older, that have chronic illnesses, that have heart disease, someone with lung disease, diabetes, chronic kidney or liver disease, compromised immune systems, are all going to be more susceptible. But then that's something that generally affects at least someone in our environment and in our very close environment. So it's very important that we know how to protect ourselves and how to protect them moving forward. Which brings us to incubation time. So incubation time is the time that it takes from the virus entering our body to the time where we actually start to have symptoms. So what we consider to be incubation time in Canada in our protocols is up to 14 days. We know the average time it takes to actually start having symptoms be present are between 5 and 6 days. What do we know? So we know that the survival rate of this virus will last anywhere from 3 hours to 9 days, depending on the surface that it's in contact with. So for instance, if it's on our skin, it's not going to last very long. If it's on a metal surface or a damp surface we can see that it's going to exist for a longer period of time. We've heard the term over and over again that it's encapsulated. Encapsulated just basically meaning that it's enveloped in a fatty layer, which is good because it makes it also very easy to deactivate on surfaces if we take the proper measures. And it's not all products that are going to be effective at cleaning and removing that virus, but it's not something that's going to require super strength products either, just proper and safe protocols. We know that it's found in the saliva, it's found in nasal secretions. Sometimes they've found it in feces of hospitalized patients. We don't know for sure what relevance that has at this point scientifically. We do know that you can be an asymptomatic carrier though, and that's very important when we're going into work, when customers are coming in our doors, when we're interacting with people just in our community, because we can be contagious without ever having any symptom. So what we don't know. What we don't know is the amount of virus it takes exposure to for it to make us sick. We don't know the exact distance that the virus can travel. And we don't know if we can actually be immunized. So will my body remember that it was previously attacked, and will it be capable of defending itself if I've already contracted the virus? But now we go back to work, and we're thrilled about that, but we're also probably a little anxious about it as well, because we need to learn to live with the virus. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in our communities. It's still in our day-to-day existence. There's no real efficient treatment for it yet, although scientists are working nonstop. We don't have a vaccine for it yet. So we need to look at what we're left with. And what we're left with are prevention. Actions, testing, isolating, the things that are in our control that we can actually do to move forward. So what are those preventative measures? We're going to break them down into a few categories: hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, physical distancing, PPE, and all that encompasses depending on what we're working with, and surface disinfection. So we've known pandemics in the past. They've happened before. We know that a germ is a germ. They aren't new. We've had gastros, there's colds, there's flus all year round. Coronavirus is a new one, but it's still a germ. And we're going to fight it. We're going to prevent it in the same way that we prevent contamination from other viruses. But for us to do that, we need to improve our prevention awareness measures, because unlike other viruses, we don't yet have treatment or vaccine, and we don't have any idea when that's coming. We need to get back to day-to-day lives. So we need to know if we contract the virus, our immune system is strong enough to defend ourselves, and what can we do to prevent contraction, and what can we do to prevent transmitting it to others around us. So the surface life of this virus is a little bit longer than a cold germ. Its life expectancy is less than the germ that fills us with gastrointestinal flu every year. It's easy to kill on surfaces, so it doesn't require anything super strength to destroy it. It's transmitted in the same way that all other respiratory viruses are transmitted. So we already have a lot of information to work with and to help us, but like with any knowledge that we have, we need to know how to apply it. And based on the information that we have today, we've tried to develop some guidelines to help you moving forward. So let's look at the chain of transmission. We know it's not inevitable. There's things we can do. There's things in our control to prevent against the transmission of the virus. It's not a mystery. It doesn't fly. It doesn't sit at home and contemplate how it's going to trap you. So there are things that are in our control that we can be doing to prevent the spread of a virus. The biggest problem with viruses, or with this virus, is that it's invisible. So we can slip, we can forget, we can get too comfortable. We're already seeing that if you're going out in grocery stores today, where people were very vigilant and very particular, and now they're picking up the loaf of bread and squeezing it. They're picking up fruit and examining it and putting it back down. So we really, really need to be careful that we're not getting too comfortable. It isn't the time for complacency. Let's look at an overview of different types of germs. Our bodies actually need some of them, and our body's very accustomed to dealing with germs that are in our environment. It's why the whole debate of were we better in quarantine or not. Our bodies actually have billions of germs, but we also have immune systems. And if we're healthy, our immune systems never stop working. Every second of the day, they're working. They're there to protect us, to keep us healthy. They don't stop. The human body is just amazing. How does transmission start? You need a source. You need someone infected by the germ. The germ will multiply in the body of the source, come out of the body, get transported to another person somehow, and infect that second person. So if we take a look at a couple of the pictures that you're seeing on the screen, I'm sure, much like myself, it's very easy to see how could we end up with some transmission of microbes. We have carriers in our body that are particularly useful in transmitting germs. So we have the nose, the mouth, the eyes, the skin, injuries, feces, urine, genitals. These are all just an overview of ways that germs particularly can be transmitted. When we're looking at the coronavirus, though, what we know is that there are actually 3 very specific ways that the virus can leave our body and contract, and we can bring it, it's someone else's body, and we can bring it into our own. And that's through our nose, through our eyes, and through the saliva. Maybe feces, again, the jury's still out on that one. How do germs travel in general? Through direct contact. And with direct contact, we're talking about giving someone a kiss, a hug, shaking hands, touching someone. At some moment in time, you're in their bubble or they're in yours. Indirect contact, transmission of germs with hands and a surface. So you've picked something up, then you've brought your hand to your face. We also have droplets that can transmit germs and viruses. And droplets become a little bit confusing for people. We've got large, medium, and small, and dependent on the size of that droplet, where it can be transmitted and how it can be transmitted. So essentially, if I cough or I sneeze and I don't cover my mouth, transmission can go to anyone in my space. If they're breathing it in, they risk becoming infected. And finally, there's transmission that happens of germs in general by air. So the really good news is that scientifically proven transmission of COVID right now, we only have direct, indirect, and droplets. There's no indicator of the virus being airborne. So that's fabulous. Again, it's giving us yet another tool to move forward with. And we're going to look at disinfection. Disinfection makes sense because of how long COVID-19 can survive on surfaces. On our skin, we know it can survive only a few minutes. It's important to remember it's not transmitted through the skin, so you're not absorbing it in your pores. It's a respiratory virus, so you need to bring it in contact with your mouth, with your eyes, or with the nasal cavity to allow it to invade your body. So essentially, if I rub my eyes, my nose, touch my face, adjust my glasses, these are all times that I have almost an open door that I can welcome the virus into my body. And it also means the good news is if I keep my hands clean and I don't touch my face, then I can really dramatically reduce the risk. So what happens when it enters your body? We don't know how large an absorption we need to actually become infected, but we do know that one of 2 things will occur. Either the body is going to fight the virus, we're not going to have any symptoms, or the body is going to need to defend itself against an invasion of virus, and we're going to have symptoms that start to occur. Which is why incubation time is very important. So what can we do about it? How do we avoid transmitting? If we have a microbe, or if we believe that we've been in contact with a microbe, we can stay home, we can isolate, we can go and get a test. We can be careful, sneezing, coughing, respiratory etiquette, hand washing, we're hearing over and over again, physical distancing and disinfection. Points of entry, we know what they are, and we need to have a receptive person. So who's contagious? Who can we get the virus from? Your customer could potentially be feeling unwell and bring the virus into you. So it's going to be very important that moving forward, when you're scheduling your appointments, when you're confirming your appointments, that your reception is always very on task and checking to see that everyone's okay. There are health questionnaires that have been released by the governing boards we have here in Quebec as well. Essentially standard form that's going to ask, have you traveled lately? Have you experienced fever? And it'll give you the checklist to go through with your patient. But again, we also know that the virus, we can be an asymptomatic carrier of it. So the rule of thumb in any pandemic is you need to always carry yourself and protect yourself as if you could be contagious, as if your customer is contagious, and that's the way that we're keeping both ourselves and our customers safe. So what can we do? The first thing we can do is wash our hands, wash our hands, wash our hands. We're hearing it over and over again, but it's scientifically proven very effective in decreasing the transmission of gastro by 72%, other respiratory infections by more than 50%. It's easy to do. It's easy to be effective if we do it well. And oftentimes we don't put that much attention on it because we consider it to be too simple to work. But if we're looking at all of the science behind it, it still remains the #1 form of prevention, which again is something great because we are so used to washing our hands in aesthetics. So when does someone wash their hands? In general, we know all the rules. You wash their hands when you've touched something, before eating, after eating, medications, anytime you could have possibly come in contact with something. When do we wash our hands in aesthetics? All of those same times, plus before and after a customer, before and after wearing gloves, after touching products, lotions, potions, treatments, and any other time that you judge necessary. So anytime that you're actually coming in contact with someone, you can be very comfortable to go and wash your hands as an effective preventative. So we also encourage our patients and our customers coming in to wash their hands and to disinfect. And this is one of the new protocols like you see going into a grocery store or pharmacy today when the customer arrives, and when they depart the premises, ideally they should be washing their hands. Also, all of the other general moments, if they've stepped into another room, if they've changed a treatment room, if you've taken them from one location to another, ideally, yes, anything that they're touching, their hands should be washed. And you should also feel at ease to guide them. It's for your protection and for theirs that you're kind of giving them that little reminder as we go through. And when we're all going through, it's all new for us, so we need to help each other. So what do you choose? Do you choose soap and water, hand sanitizer, or both? Depending on your setup, depending on the ease you have at placing a sink at the entrance of your clinic, you may be opting for hand sanitizer. But there's a few important things that you need to understand about disinfection and about soap and water. And this is information that a lot of us probably know already, but that maybe your customer coming in doesn't. And just reminding them of that and gently making that information available to them is going to help keep them safe. So what's the difference? Hand washing, we're going to decrease the number of germs to a safe level. We know it's a mechanical action. We use a detergent, we use water. From the time we start to see that sudsing and foaming, we should work for another 20 to 30 seconds, and we want to have a lot of friction. Hand sanitizer, same type of thing, relatively the same amount of time involved, and it's going to kill up to 99% of germs. So at the end of the day, if we wash our hands with soap and water, we're going to detach the germs and we're going to have them rinsed away. But friction is going to be tremendously important to create efficacy. If we're disinfecting our hands, if our hands are wet, or our hands are moist when we apply that hand sanitizer. Maybe you were a little bit nervous coming in today. Maybe driving in the car, your hands got a little bit damp. That disinfectant, you're now going to dilute on surface. And you're not going to get the same level of disinfection. The same thing if you have lotion on your hands. How many times have we been washing our hands and washing our hands to crazy levels that our hands are dry and irritated. People are putting creams, they're putting lotions on their skin, then they're applying the disinfectant, going into the grocery store, feeling that that is going to provide them with adequate protection. At the end of the day, we know you've actually diluted the hand sanitizer. So you want to be sure that you're always working with a clean surface and a dry surface when you're working with hand sanitizer. If I'm wearing gloves and I take them off, I need to follow appropriate hands hygiene. If my hands were damp, if they were sweaty, if there was powder in my gloves, I need to know that I need to remember, first thing I need to do is wash my hands. And lots of times, especially people that we're seeing out in the grocery stores, wearing gloves, going into public spaces, wearing gloves, they may not have the knowledge that if your hands are damp or moist, you need to be doing more. So we suggest maybe printing this out or finding a poster like it on the Health Canada website or your provincial health services website, just putting it up, posting it somewhere within your establishment so that it's a reminder to your customers as how to do things properly. The second thing is respiratory etiquette to break the chain. So obviously you want to cover your mouth, cover your nose if you're sneezing, if you're coughing. Obviously it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but you're at least preventing the germ from propagating into the entire space of the room. The other thing we're seeing, physical distancing. Physical distancing is very new for our culture and our population. In aesthetics, we're definitely always much closer than the recommended distance. So we need to kind of become a little bit more creative at looking at how to work with these guidelines. So first, what is physical distancing? In Canada, we're betting on 2 meters of distance between people to help us to achieve our goals. Some other countries have established a 1 meter distance. In Canada, we've gone that little step further. When you can't have that 2 meter distance, then what do you do? The next possible option for us is to create a physical barrier. So we've seen the plexiglass walls go up, we've seen shields go up. Essentially, those are all tools that we're working with to try to create that physical barrier when we can't create the physical distance between us and the patient. Again, in aesthetics, oftentimes that is not going to be a possibility. So what do we do? The next thing we look at is PPE. So what about gloves? Are they just for the parking lot? We've seen them scattered everywhere. Realistically, the recommendations of the Quebec health officials right now, understanding it's always evolving, with the use of gloves for aesthetics treatment, whatever procedure you normally wore gloves, please continue to do so. Whatever procedures you didn't wear gloves for, there's no added benefit to using them. In fact, oftentimes when you're wearing gloves, they give you a false sense of security. You see people walking around in stores all the time, they're cross-contaminating. And it's going to be very important how you remove the gloves. So you want to be sure, not wearing any jewelry, your hands, you want to wash and dry them thoroughly before you're putting them on, after you're taking them off. You're using them solely for contact with the treatment and with the patient that you're treating, and you're never ever going to reuse those gloves. They're single use. So what do you do about your customer coming in wearing gloves? The rule of thumb is to still ask the customer to please remove the gloves, to wash or disinfect their hands, and the risk of them actually touching anything is going to be much less than the possibility of cross-contamination when they're wearing gloves. PPE and masks. Masks are another big debate. What are we wearing? What do we need to wear when we're not able to maintain that distance? So in public places, recommendations are that we are wearing some form of masks. Those masks can be the homemade masks, which we'll look at afterwards, when we're just roaming in and out of stores or just having very small, short contacts with people. When we're actually in a space where we're not going to be able to maintain that distance and where we're having hands-on, very close proximity to our customers and to our patients, then essentially we do need to be wearing a mask as the practitioner, and we need to know which one we're going to wear. So an N95 is definitely fantastic for filtering out small droplets. It needs to be perfectly fitted to the wearer, and it is designed solely for medical use. It's not recommended for aesthetics. We don't do procedures that produce bioaerosols. We're not intubating patients. So we don't require that level of filtration. And at the same point, if it's not actually specifically fitted for us, we're not actually safe. Procedure mask or surgical mask is actually what the Quebec guidelines are directing us to be using. So while they don't filter air, they will absorb large droplets. They aren't tight, they aren't a filter, but they're the ones that are currently suggested because they're reducing the passage of those droplets from yourself to your patient. Handmade masks, cloth face coverings, understand they're not standardized. Lots of people have purchased masks to be able to have them in their clinics for their personnel. If it's a material mask or a cloth face mask, it isn't something that's been tested, so you can't be 100% certain of its efficacy. If you are wearing a cloth mask just for social purposes, you want to be sure that you're following the recommendations: cotton mix, 2 to 3 layers, tightly woven. You don't want any stitching in the front. But when we're actually working in clinic, you want to be using a surgical or a procedure mask. You also want, as much as possible, your patient, your customer, to be wearing a mask. And they can be wearing a mask that's a material mask, although we would strongly suggest as well the procedure mask. Again, it's for your protection as for theirs. One of the points, and Moshe, I'm assuming, will add to it in a little bit as well, is about communication and the level of communication that you can be having with your customer at the time of a treatment. Understanding if we can answer all those questions before we're actually in the treatment room, if we can do the follow-up when we're outside of the treatment room, during that time period where we're not able to maintain the physical distancing, the less communication, the less verbal communication, the better and the safer everyone is. You need eye protection when you're doing treatments. Again, when we're not able to maintain that 2 meters of distance, we need to be sure that we have goggles or a visor, whatever's going to adapt best to the personal treatment that you're offering. So if you're wearing goggles, you want to be sure that they're fitting nice and tight and securely to the face so that it's going to prevent you from passing your finger, wiping your eye, rubbing your eye. Again, the goggles are for your protection. The purpose is to protect you from any droplets that could be released from your patient as they're talking, as they're coughing, if they sneeze. Smocks, uniforms, and linens. So employees should wear a clean smock and uniform between each client. We're asking that you have a uniform, you have a smock, you have something that covers, you have scrubs, maybe something that covers you completely. They can be reusable. If they're reusable material, you want to be sure you remove them properly. In between patients, you put them in a tight container or a sealed bag, and until they're maintained that way until they're going to be able to be laundered at home or in your clinic. When you're doing the cleansing of the fabrics, you want to be sure that you're following the recommendations of the fabric. You want to be sure that you're drying to the highest temperature that the material will tolerate, and that at the end of the day, you're cleaning and disinfecting the clothes hampers that you're putting those linens in. Again, the possibility of cross-contamination is always there, so we need to be vigilant and we can prevent. So once we've safely removed all of the PPE, now we need to look at how we disinfect our surfaces. What do we use? And there's important things to remember. Essentially, The most important is that a virus can't multiply on surfaces. So it's not a bacteria, it's a parasite. It needs a host to actually develop. If there's contamination on a surface when you leave your clinic this evening, that same amount of contamination or less will be there tomorrow morning. So select what time is going to be best for you to do thorough cleansing and disinfection of your clinic, because the most important thing is that you're going to be vigilant when it's being done. There are some companies that have actually been very proactive and opened up recently that are offering their services to come in and do that full cleaning and disinfection certified at the end of your day or before the beginning of your next day. Again, very important to remember, and it keeps coming back to us, is that it's an encapsulated virus. So we know if effectively we've cleaned well with soap and water, that we've actually been able to deactivate that virus. And there's a difference. We need to be sure what products we're using and what we're doing to disinfect. So we've got two different levels of cleanliness. You have a visual clean and you have an actual disinfection. So the visual clean, when I walk into your establishment, I look around, I can see it's clean. It looks nice. It looks like everything, all of your cleanup's been done. But I don't know if it's been disinfected, because disinfection is invisible. It's not something that we can just look at and go, yes, that's been done and it's been done adequately. So the way around that, and the way to ensure that it's actually being done properly, is to look at some very specific guidelines. So how do we disinfect? We understand when we're disinfecting, it's a temporary state. There's that one moment in time, that 1 second in time when we've actually disinfected the environment and there's no contamination. And a second later, obviously, we have more germs coming into play. So we need to understand that it's a repetitive process. It's not something we can be done the second we have exposure to anything in the environment. We've opened up the door again to some exposure. 80% of the transmission of germs happens through indirect contact between hands and objects. So we want to be sure that we're paying careful attention to areas of high contact, and we want to know what we're using as the disinfectant. So obviously there's been a lot of shortages of disinfectants, of cleaning supplies, of several things over the last couple of months. And while that seems to have balanced itself, we do have a ton of new companies that have popped up and provide new services. And like with anything else, when we're looking at cleaning materials or disinfectants, we're looking at marketing as well. So some of the terms that you'll see can be antibacterial, or 99.5% of domestic germs are killed, or it kills germs, or it's complete inside of 30 seconds. But what we need to understand is oftentimes those are buzzwords that are used in marketing, and there's no real proof behind it. When you read on the bottle, when you read on the technical papers that go with your products that you're selecting, viricide, fungicide, bactericide, germicide, we know that it's proven. We know that these are controlled terms, that they've been proven microbiologically for each category. So what does that mean? We have different categories of germs. We have from the most resistant to the least resistant. You'll see on the screen. We work our way down, viruses that are non-encapsulated, like hepatitis A, fungi, bacteria, and down at the very, very end of our list, we have herpes, chickenpox, coronavirus, and measles. So we know that if we're looking to disinfect a surface, for us actually to be able to prevent transmission, we need to be working with a bactericide or a viricide to effectively destroy coronavirus. So those are two of the things that we'll be looking for on our guidelines. To effectively disinfect, again, we need to know what we're doing. We need to follow specific parameters, because we can't just look at something visually and know that it's been disinfected. So what are the protocols we use? The appropriate product, the correct strength, enough time, efficiency of a particular material, a clean, dry surface, and a clean cloth. Again, very important that when we're looking at products, there are a ton of products out there. There's a link in our PDF here that's accessible to you, that's also on the Health Canada website, that will give you a list of all of the products and disinfectants that are considered approved and safe by Health Canada with the prevention of transmission of COVID-19. You want to be sure that you're using the correct concentration. Follow the instructions on the product 100%. It's not the time to go, I'm going to use some guesswork. Yes, I think that was about a half a cup that I put in, maybe about 2 liters of water. You want to be sure that your measurements are exact and precise. Inaccuracy destroys effectiveness. And the easiest way around that, obviously, is to buy products that are already pre-mixed and prepared and approved by Health Canada. Are pre-soaked disinfectant wipes effective? Is a big question that we hear. Again, you want to be sure what your disinfectant wipe is used for. There are disinfectant wipes that have been designed to be used on the skin. There are those that are designed to be used on surface areas. Read the labels, check the technicals, check all of the details. We need to really do our research and do our homework, and Health Canada has made it tremendously easy by listing everything. How long does it take? 30 seconds, a minute, 15, 20 minutes? There's no such thing as instantaneous. So there's nothing that you can apply that on instantaneous contact is going to destroy the virus. You need to be sure when we're looking at disinfection that we're following the protocols. If it says, please apply this product, leave it on the surface for 5 minutes, it doesn't mean we're going to spray it on and wipe it off inside of 2 minutes because we're rushed in between customers. You really need to follow to a T. And again, here's some fun facts. 80% of people believe in disinfection, but only 42% of them do it correctly. 26% spray and wipe immediately. 16% will wipe very superficially. Don't forget, use the appropriate product for the recommended time on the surface it's designed for. Follow the directions of the manufacturer to a T. They know their product best. So what do we disinfect? High contact areas. In our clinics, in our space, high contact areas are anything that are being touched relatively often by each of our customers coming in, or many staff in your establishment. So doorknobs, light switches, phones, keyboards, the washroom area, the kitchenette area, your coffee machine, the linen hampers, the microwave, all of those things are high contact areas. And the recommendations by our health officials are that those high contact areas should be wiped down every 2 hours throughout your shift. So common space, when we're looking at it, we have the waiting room, we have the washroom, we have the counters, your products in the background in your reception. If you can put up a plexiglass, we can put some better spacing in between the chairs. And again, you want to remove anything that isn't necessary in your space. So the decorative wool that we have here, the flowers that we have, yes, they're beautiful, but they're one more thing that right now can carry the contamination from a virus. So it's one more thing you need to disinfect. So in 2020, maybe our key word is minimalism. We're going to try to have as little as possible to be sure that we're able to move forward, that we're able to provide the services that we love with the passion that we have, and that our customers are going to be able to receive our treatments very safely. Equipment disinfection. It's very important that you get in touch with the manufacturer of your devices to know what you can use on what specific devices. There are some that we can be using 70% alcohol, some you're going to use cavi wipes, others that have electrical components, it becomes a little bit trickier. So if we look at our specific equipment, we have a couple of the devices that, yes, we can go ahead very easily with 70% alcohol. We have parts of devices, like the body, like the hand pieces, that we're able to go ahead with 70% alcohol. What we recommend, what the manufacturer's recommendations are for the actual screens is that you would cover them with some type of plastic wrap, a saran wrap, shield, what have you. And then you can disinfect that wrap as you go, or you can remove it, dispose of it properly, wash your hands, apply a new wrap to be sure that when we're touching the screen, rule of thumb is if we've touched it or if your customer has touched it, inside of your treatment time, inside of your space, you need to be sure that everything is completely cleaned and disinfected. So coming into my treatment room, if I'm touching my magnifying lamp, if I'm touching a chair, if I'm touching the side of the bed, or if my customer is, all of that needs to be wiped down and disinfected every time I'm seeing a customer. I need to change either the lab coat, the uniform, the scrubs that I'm wearing, the mask, the gloves automatically, and clean and disinfect my goggles or my shield. So summary, we've just covered this. I got ahead of myself, sorry. Disinfection after every use, anything we've touched, anything the customer's touched. Disinfection several times per day, and we recommend at 2-hour intervals, contact zones and common areas. So in your waiting area, in your washroom area, counters, daily cleaning and disinfection, all common areas. And obviously we still continue with sterilization of any instruments that require that. Don't forget, you can't clean a dirty surface. We can't disinfect. We can disinfect a clean surface, and you must clean a surface prior to disinfecting. What do we use to clean those surfaces and to disinfect? So there are a few things that keep popping up in the classes that I've seen and the guidelines that we've been given. Typically the 4 methods that are most commonly used are a bucket and a cloth, which we know there's a high risk of cross-contamination. You're taking that same cloth in and out of your bucket, and the mixture isn't necessarily homogeneous between your cleanser and the water that's being used, so it may not be the best rule of thumb. Spray and dry, definitely you're always risking inhalation of whatever we're spraying on the counters, whatever we're spraying on the surfaces, so you can end up with inhalation that can compromise your health overall, which we don't want to do. And we need to be sure always that we're never reusing the same cloth. If you're using a spout, definitely that reduces some risk. But I think across the board, what we've found to be the most effective and the safest type of disinfection, of surface disinfection, is using cloths that have been pre-soaked, whether that be wipes that you've purchased, whether that be cloths that you have prepared with your mixture of appropriate disinfection and disinfectant and soaked it prior to use, and that you're changing your cloth each time. There was a beautiful little reminder that I saw in one of the trainings that I participated in recently, and that was fold your cloth in 4. So you're going to fold it in half twice. It leaves you with 4 clean surfaces. Your hand glove contact is always protected. It's more ecologically friendly maybe than wipes, and it ensures that we're using proper hygiene. So how do we clean our supplies? Do we use Javex? Do we use detergent? What do we use on dishes? What do we use on the tools that we're coming in contact with? The pens, the files, the consent forms. Whatever is designed, whatever detergent or disinfectant is designed for that particular material. We don't need to go crazy. We do need to use appropriate disinfectants. So just a really quick overview. Good collaboration between you, your team, and your customers is going to be what's crucial moving forward. We can't eliminate risk at 100%, but we can control it and we can reduce it. So number 1 rule of thumb, if you have symptoms, if they have symptoms, stay home. If you're working and you start to develop symptoms, go home, isolate, and report it. Every province has a number to call in. I think Health Canada has a 1-800 number as well that you can call in and report those symptoms so that we're sure we're doing monitoring of transmission as well. Patient makes an appointment. Be sure when you're confirming that appointment, you're assessing general health. Are they feeling great? A lot of clinics at this time are doing some live videos, going through the protocols that they'll have for their customers. So it's not going to be shocking or overwhelming when they're coming in. At the same time, it allows you to reduce the number of calls that you're making. If you have a lot of your customers on social media, generally it's the case, and you can kind of go over those rules very, very quickly. You also want to double check when your customer's coming in. Have they recently traveled? Go through that questionnaire that's provided by Health Canada. When it's possible, be sure you're maintaining that 2-meter distance. That's your first rule of thumb. When it's not possible, you want to have that physical barrier, whether it be plexiglass, a wall, what have you. And when we're not able to have that barrier, then we move on to the personal protective equipment. You want to be sure that the distance is always maintained and that we're following those guidelines at all times. When the customer leaves, we're following those guidelines with our staff. When it's a lunch break, when someone's gone outdoors just to get some fresh air, make sure when you're going out, you're still keeping that distance. Handshakes and hugs, although it's what we're made of, we're social creatures that deal with the public and have a passion for dealing with the public if we're in this industry, but it needs to be avoided for now. Workstations, you want to make additional space in between them if you can. Make sure that you've got appropriate distances. Maybe remove some chairs from your waiting area to allow for proper spacing. If you have patients that are coming in or that are going to have to pass in a common space or waiting for a cash, be sure to put up some physical markers. It could be tape, it could be lines drawn on the floor to kind of give us that guideline, because as we move forward, we're getting a little bit more comfortable and we're getting a little bit more lax in what that 2-meter distance is. So for right now, until things settle, we want to be sure that we're going forward safely. If you can, if it's accessible, do try to have a sink accessible for your customers coming in right away. A lot of businesses are actually suggesting that their customer wait outside in the parking area, that they call you, that they text you to let you know they've arrived, and you'll tell them, call them and text them, tell them when it's the appropriate time to come in. Ask your customer to please limit bringing non-essential items with them. So if you're coming in, you know what, don't bring in your grocery bags with you. Don't bring in a purse and a handbag and maybe an umbrella if it's not absolutely necessary. Understand anything you're bringing in or that they're bringing into the environment is one more thing that's going to be deposited on a surface. So one more thing that you're going to need to always be mindful of with disinfection. Make sure that your customers are aware and that they're coming for their appointments on their own. Sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes, you know what, the mom comes in to get her nails done, or someone comes in for a cut at the barber that they're bringing in their daughter, their son with them. Please, as much as possible, try to limit it, that it's the customer themselves that's coming in. Be sure that you have the safety equipment that you need. Be sure that your disinfection processes are happening. And finally, be sure that your air conditioner and your heating systems, but your air conditioner, moreover, as we're moving forward, is being properly maintained. That the proper cleaning of filters has been done, that everything has been done to ensure that the area we're dealing with and the conditions that we're working in are going to be as positively healthy as possible. High contact areas, remove everything that's possible, declutter our environment, stay strong, stay healthy, stay proactive, and I'm really excited to see you all soon. Good luck. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you so very much, Ellen. It was very comprehensive and very, very good. So I encourage you guys, if you have any specific questions about our equipment, specifically to our equipment, how we can disinfect it or how we can sanitize it, you are most welcome to email us, to call us. We are always here. And Ellen, thank you very much. It was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night. Good evening. Bye-bye.